I'd like to acknowledge the Gomeroi people on whose land the the Whitehaven mines around Narrabri stand. It's a very tragic situation. 10 years ago, on September the 29th, 2014, I was arrested outside Whitehaven's Tarrawonga mine near Boggabri. The following day, my granddaughter Neve was born. I had decided to make a stand against Whitehaven because the previous week, on the 23rd of September 2014, the UN Secretary-General then, Ban Ki-moon, had called for concerted global climate action to put our house in order to make it livable for future generations. Today, in Australia, that vision has gone out the window. The Albanese Labor government has given up on Neve's generation. In a moment, I will describe conditions in Australia in 75 years' time, at the end of this century, when Neve will be only a little older than I am now. Instead of stopping any further fossil fuel expansions, as the current UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, says we must, the Albanese government has approved 3 new coal mines this year and has waved through as a modification Idemitsu's dangerously deep and destructive expansion called Modification 8, just next door to Whitehaven's mines. Whitehaven has 3 huge coal developments on the table: Blackwater South, Winchester South and Vickery. Tanya Plibersek spruiks Australia's strong environmental laws to keep the world safe from emissions burden imposed on the world by Whitehaven and other fossil fuel companies. But Whitehaven flouts these laws constantly. They have just been convicted in the Land and Environment Court, as Vishnu mentioned, for their latest crime, a massive open-cut blast that went badly wrong. Not so long ago, they were convicted and prosecuted for unlawfully capturing 1 billion litres of water during the 2016 to 19 drought. A further 8 blast fume prosecutions are before the court. The Knitting Nannas, of which I am a member, have recently been poring over this very alarming essay called Highway to Hell: Climate Change and Australia's Future by Joelle Gerges, a leading author for the IPCC's 6th Assessment Report. She says most Australians aren't aware of how bad things are and how much worse they'll get. Joelle points out that even if nations make good on their Paris Agreement net zero promises, which is a big if, there is a 90% chance that the world is still facing 2.4 degrees of global warming. If they don't fulfil their promises and current climate policies continue as they are, the best estimate for global warming is 3.5 degrees by the end of the century. Global emissions need to actually fall by 43% by 2030 to limit warming to 1.5 degrees at the end of the century, or to fall by 28% to stay around 2 degrees. Neve has just turned 10. She spends much of her time upside down doing cartwheels on the lawn or aerobatics on the trampoline. Her level of energy would be expected to set her up for a long and healthy life. She's also thoughtful about society. But will any sort of society that we would recognise even exist in 2099 at the end of this century, when she's 85, which is not that much older than I am today, or some of the other nannies here as well? The latest UN reports say that there are hard limits to what people can adapt to beyond 2 degrees. 3.5 is unthinkable, causing unsurvivable heat, ecosystem collapse, sea level rises inundating most of Australia's important infrastructure, and causing our beloved beaches to disappear. Shrinkage of arable land through drought, Famine and wars over scarce resources. Disasters like fire, storms and floods will occur back to back, not allowing time for recovery in between. This is the world of 2099. I am enraged beyond measure that this government is willing to throw next generation to the wolves for ephemeral political gain. Faced with such a grim reality, you would expect government to do everything in its power to make greenhouse gas emissions fall. But Australia's greenhouse gas emissions are not falling, they're rising. There are currently plans for 100 new coal and gas projects in Australia. The government subsidises fossil fuels to the tune of $11.1 billion a year. They also subsidise gas infrastructure with about $2 billion. Ironically, if the government decided it didn't have to spend this money and had the courage to introduce a carbon tax, there would be plenty to accelerate the clean energy revolution and transform Australia into a clean energy superpower. And activists, myself included, would be only too happy to spend our time supporting nature in ways other than breaking the increasingly draconian laws. Just after Neve's 10th birthday, despairing at the lack of action to protect our vital native forest from industrial logging, I locked myself onto a logging machine. I am very anxiously awaiting trial for a newly created offence which may carry a jail term. Thank you.